After finding out that his intern Peter Parker is the vigilante known as Spider-Man, Norman invites Peter to have a private dinner with him. And it's here we learn exactly how smart this version of Osborn is, since he started the internship program as a way to actively track down people who are connected to Spider-Man. Apparently, Norman wants to thank Spider-Man for rescuing his son, Harry, but given the fact that this is Norman Osborn we're talking about here, I wouldn't be surprised to learn that he does have an ulterior motive in mind. So he offers Peter the chance to work in a partnership with him, and although Peter initially declines said offer, he does agree to stay at the internship in order to help Aunt May pay her bills. However, Osborn's help does prove to come in handy when Peter becomes outmaneuvered by a criminal couple with mysterious high-tech gear. And since Norman does help defeat the two criminals, Peter does accept his partnership offer after all. Meanwhile, the Avengers end up fracturing over the Sokovian Accords, so Norman believes he and Peter must step up to become the protectors of New York. So he has Peter try on various suits and identities that Oscorp has developed for him. And while most of the suits don't really work for Peter, I have to admit that this made for a pretty fun montage. It made me feel like I was playing Spider-Man PS4 or something, trying to see which suit I like playing in the most. And since I failed to mention this in my review for the series premiere, I'd also like to point out that this series also reminds me of Ultimate Spider-Man, which I absolutely loved playing as a kid. And the art style of this show definitely feels reminiscent to the art style of that game. Speaking of which, I will admit that the animation did feel a bit more fluid in these 3 episodes. I don't know if the animation actually got better or if my eyes simply got adjusted to the animation, but I was able to enjoy the animation overall, especially with seeing Spider-Man in all of his new suits. At any rate, Peter accidentally reveals his identity to Harry while returning to Norman's office, so Norman decides to get Harry involved with this Spider-Man partnership, which could work for Norman since he is a busy businessman, but it also allows Harry to have an actual friend. So we finally get to see what a Harry and Peter friendship would look like in this universe, since Harry doesn't seem to exist within the MCU just yet. And it'll be interesting to see how Harry's relationship with Peter will develop, since he knows that Pete is Spider-Man so early into their friendship. But his friendship with Harry may drive a new wedge within his friendship with Nico, as Pete hasn't been able to make enough time for Nico. So while I thought that Nico was going to become Spider-Man's guy in the chair, like Ned was in the MCU, it looks like that role is going to be occupied by Harry instead. Which is interesting, especially since they successfully managed to defeat some Russian criminals together. Criminals who were being backed by the one and only Otto Octavius. And while I don't really know what Octavius's plan is at this point in the show, I can't deny that I enjoyed seeing his presence here, since he is such an iconic Spider-Man villain. So I definitely want to see what kind of role he'll play in the story being told here. But while I obviously enjoyed learning more about this version of Spider-Man, I was surprised to see how much time was spent developing the character of football star Lonnie Lincoln, because he basically acts as a secondary protagonist. So while all of the stuff with Peter is going down, we see how Lonnie inadvertently gets involved with the 110th Street gang. And even though he only got involved with the gang as a means to protect his younger brother Andre, it seems like Lonnie is going to be stuck in this gang. because now that the rival gang members are aware of Lonnie's identity, he's forced to use the 110th Street Gang as a means of protection for him and his family. And that totally has to suck, considering that Lonnie had a bright future ahead of him. But it'll be interesting to see how Lonnie's character will develop from here, especially as he starts to distance himself from his friends and family members. I mean, sure, he may be doing it to protect them from the gang, but they don't know that. From their perspective, it may just look like Lonnie joined a gang for no reason, and that he's deliberately choosing to throw away his future. But Lonnie is a good kid who happens to be a victim of circumstance, and that does make his story an undeniably fascinating one. So, juxtaposing his journey with that of Peter Parker's did make for some interesting television, because the two characters may be under the tutelage of some incredibly dangerous villains, but I'm sure that their stories will end up having two vastly different outcomes, and I definitely want to see where the show will take these two characters, especially if their storylines are going to intersect. Which means that, if you couldn't already tell by the tone of this entire video, I did enjoy these episodes quite a bit. So even though I was a little negative on the series premiere, I was a lot more receptive to these past few episodes. And even though I wasn't sure if this show was going to be able to keep my investments at first, I have to admit that I'm fully on board with the story being told now, because I definitely want to see what'll happen on the next few episodes of Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man once they get released on Wednesday.